Hi! As you can probably hear from the loud ticks and tocks and clunks all around me, I'm presenting today from the Electric Horology Room in the Museum of Timekeeping, where we have our collection of industrial horological items. I'm going to start today by talking to you about the earth-driven electric clock, which is quite unlike any other clock that came before. Invented in 1911 by Percival Arthur Bentley, it was said that once properly calibrated, these clocks could run for years without any need for adjustment. The electric clock doesn't rely on mains power, although by 1910, a lot of middle-class businesses and homes were connected to the mains electric. Instead, this clock had two metal prongs which came out from underneath the clock and into the ground. There they picked up the electric current from the earth itself, only about 1 volt at the point of contact, but it was enough to set the pendulum in motion. This turns on its head the idea of how a traditional long case clock would work. So ordinarily, in a mechanical escapement, the wind in the escapement gives the energy to the pendulum and controls it, whereas in this clock, the energy is delivered to this magnetised bar here, which then drives the escapement, so completely turning that kinetic energy exchange on its head to keep the clock going. The magnetised pendulum has a really clever way of ensuring that this clock keeps accurate time. It has an automatic switch which reverses the current at the end of each swing of the pendulum. So we can see here the pendulum travelling back and forth, and as it reaches the furthest point of its swing, that switch reverses the current which is being fed to it by those two metal spikes in the ground, pushing the pendulum back the other way. This meant that it was incredibly accurate because you could have real control over the amount of power that the pendulum was receiving at any given time. Now, in 1910, the mains electricity was incredibly unreliable and, in all honesty, rather dangerous. But what it didn't have was a constant, steady flow of electricity. Whereas when you are looking at the electric current from the ground, that was fairly stable, certainly far more stable than the mains electricity of the day. This meant that you were able to have continuous power to the pendulum without having to concern yourself with any fluctuation in voltage. The inventor of this clock, Percival Arthur Bentley, first took out a patent on this design in 1910, although the technology had been around for about 50 years prior to this. It really hadn't been utilised. So his factory, known as the Bentley Manufacturing Company, was founded swiftly after this patent was put in place. And by 1911, he was up and running. He had a team of 12 staff, and he was producing these clocks to order. And we can see in the following images some of the original clock designs from the pamphlet for the Bentley Manufacturing Company's clocks. Despite the factory looking promising, in 1914, with the onset of World War I, the manufacturing company was taken over by the MOD to help with the war effort. At the end of the First World War, it didn't go back to making these clocks, and so they remain as a tiny collection of existing electric, earth-driven clocks still in existence. In fact, it's been estimated that only around 70 of these clocks were ever made. The very first clock to be sold was bought by the Royal Automobile Club in London in Pall Mall, and that was bought for the princely sum of £55. The model that we can see behind us here, although we don't know who the original buyer was, we do know that it would have cost £45 for this model from new. The Earth-Driven Clock Company claimed that the principles of these clocks could easily be applied to clocks of any size, from wall-mounted clocks to large-scale public clocks and church clocks as well. It's a real shame they never caught on. With their low voltage and high safety, they should have been a real winner in design. And we're very pleased that you can see ours working here. The Earth-driven clock company claimed that the principles behind these clocks could easily be applied to clocks of any size. So we could have had table clocks with this kind of technology, regulators like this, as well as large public and church clocks as well. It's a real shame that they didn't catch on. They were safe, far safer than mains technology of that era, and they were also incredibly reliable, far more so again than a mechanical clock or a mains-driven electric clock at that time. However, their rarity does mean that it's incredibly fortunate that we can see ours working today, and it would be wonderful to see some of you here visiting in person.